In the grim dark of the far future, there is only war. Throughout history, we have seen untold horrors and misery inflicted on humanity by the forces of chaos and their associated ruinous powers. With trillions upon trillions of lives across countless worlds being decimated, enslaved, or corrupted by the evil forces of chaos. Humanity fights a constant pitched battle against the dark tide of corruption that seeks to sweep across the galaxy, especially in the current setting with the opening of the Great Rift. And there are those that would embrace the darkness of the warp, including Lorgar, the Fallen. Greetings all, I am your guide, the Archivist. Today I will dive into an overview of Lorgar Aurelian, his rise to power, and his final fate. Before we begin, please make sure to like the like and subscribe waypoints down below, so that more people can learn from the archives. Who was Lorgar? Lorgar, also known as Lorgar Aurelian and the Urizen, which means the wisest of the wise in Colchisian, was one of the demon princes of Chaos Undivided and the Primarch of the Wordbearer's Traitor Legion. His unwavering commitment to uplifting humanity through the propagation of his profound belief in the divine led him to seek the new gods worthier of his devotion after the Emperor of Mankind rejected his attempts at worship. During his infamous pilgrimage around 40 standard years before the Horus Heresy, he discovered the ruinous powers of chaos. Lorgar was the first Primarch of the ancient Space Marine legions to succumb to the corruption of chaos before the Horus Heresy. He orchestrated the creation of the conspiracy within the Space Marine legions, ultimately leading to the corruption of the Warmaster Horus on Davin. Currently, Lorgar and his substantial traitor legion of Wordbearers heretic Astartes reside on the demon world of Sicarus within the Eye of Terror in the 41st millennium. They are actively plotting the overthrow of the Corpse Emperor and are endeavouring to convert humanity to the worship of chaos. Origins. Colchis was steeped in the reverence of ancient deities. The belief in higher powers permeated the very essence of the world, from the caress of the sun to the taste of dust. For its inhabitants, the worship of these divine forces was as intrinsic as the rhythmic pulsing of their hearts and the plaintive cries of their offspring. Enveloped in feudal customs, Colchis had once been a hub of advanced technology, but these glories had been lost in the midst of time. Life unfolded with ease for some and adversity for others, and all were privy to the age-old truths passed down from their forebears. They knew that plagues would ravage generations, but also that such trials would eventually recede, for nothing remained static. They understood that war would descend like rain, staining the land with blood, yet assurances of happiness persisted even in the bleakest hours. They acknowledged the inevitability of death and the rise and fall of kings, but the constancy of the gods endured. Lorgar later became a prominent figure, arriving on Colchis under mysterious circumstances. As a mere infant in a gestation capsule, he vanished from Terra and found himself in this theocratic feudal world. Amidst this backdrop, a tribe known as the Declined, led by chieftain Fan Morgul, discovered the infant and bestowed upon him the name Lorgar, meaning rain-caller in the local tongue. Shortly thereafter, the exiled priest Cor Ferion and his band of outcasts encountered the enigmatic child, marking the inception of an extraordinary narrative. The primary religion on Colchis was the Covenant, later recognized as the Old Faith or the Old Ways. It revolved around the worship of four entities, who were actually the Chaos Gods in more benevolent forms. Upon recognizing the potential in the boy and deeming him blessed by the Colchisian gods he referred to as the Powers, Cor Ferion persuaded Lorgar to become his disciple. He then proceeded to eliminate Fan Morgul and the Declined in order to conceal the boy's true identity and heritage. Despite enduring Cor Ferion's severe emotional and physical mistreatment, Lorgar wholeheartedly embraced the faith of the Covenant, extensively studied its theology. He ultimately concluded that there was a single God, the One, who guided and bound together the polytheistic pantheon of the Covenant, which comprised of four lesser gods. Initially dismissing these ideas as heresy, Cor Ferion frequently mistreated Lorgar in an effort to mould the young Primarch's character and instill emotional dependence. Concurrently, he recognized Lorgar's uniqueness and sought to influence him to exploit the boy's exceptional abilities to seize control of the theocracy of the Covenant and govern Colchis. Nevertheless, despite the mistreatment, Lorgar remained unwaveringly loyal to Corpheron. He even saved his life during a mutiny by the caravan's crew after they were instructed to punish Lorgar once again by his foster father for a minor offence, with others in Corpheron's group of exiles, including the mercenary captain Axeter and the enslaved Covenant teacher Nero. Despite Corpheron's abuse, Lorgar quickly outstripped his mentor. He evolved into a zealous preacher, with his eloquence and superhuman charisma attracting numerous followers, ultimately propelling him to the position of Archpriest of the Godsworn, the followers of Lorgar's branch of the Covenant and believers in the One. After the takeover and victory of the Godsworn, many Colchissians continued to hold firm to the old faith, which ultimately laid the groundwork for the Word-Bearers' turn to chaos. When the Emperor and his Great Crusade Principe Imperialis expedition fleet arrived in Colchis in 1857 M30, less than a local year after Lorgar's triumph over the Covenant, it was a moment of profound significance. The golden-armoured Emperor of Mankind descended from his landing craft alongside the one-eyed Primarch Magnus the Red and 2 Legion tactical squads of 1,000 Sons of Astartes. This pivotal meeting solidified Lorgar's belief in his god, as the Primarch and his people wholeheartedly embraced the ruler of the Imperial Man as their promised Messiah and God Emperor. Upon meeting his long-lost Gene son face-to-face, Lorgar immediately dropped to one knee in obedience, leading the population of his world into rejoicing and worshipping the Emperor as the one God, the true God of mankind. Subsequently, the Emperor enlisted Lorgar to take his best warriors and induct them into the 17th Space Marine Legion, the Imperial Heralds, who had been created from his genome. Despite the Emperor's insistence on the Imperial truth, an atheistic, rationalist doctrine that forbade religious faith as mere superstition, Lorgar remained resolute in spreading his faith in the God Emperor across the Imperium. He joined the Great Crusade, leaving trustworthy regents to rule over Colchis in his absence, and faithfully complying to whatever he believed were his father's divine commandments. Paradoxically, the Emperor's denial of his divinity only served to strengthen Lorgar's faith, as who else but a true god would deny his own divinity? His appearance. Lorgar's appearance before his ascent to demonhood is not extremely well documented, but he is referred to on many occasions as having a distinct similarity to the Emperor in regards of his aura and appearance, holding a similar visage. Lorgar's battleplate is a suit of customized artificer armor, designed based on the Mark IV Maximus power armor. It features a defensive energy field generator, and is adorned with ancient Colchissian sigils of protection, as well as Lorgar's own words of anathema from the Book of Lorgar. He also had golden inscriptions all over his body which glowed with a faint hue. Based on the provided description, it is envisioned that Demon Lorgar would be depicted with his trademark mace and distinct 4 large horns resembling a crown. Despite not being the most imposing Primarch in terms of size and strength, as a Demon Primarch he is visualized as slightly smaller than Magnus, but exuding an air of pride akin to a Demon Prince. His armor would be adorned with his Colchissian runes, books and tattered scrolls billowing in the wind. It would be a personal preference to illustrate him standing on a pulpit-like base, arms outstretched in an oratorical prose, with a fervent expression conveying benediction, which would be very akin to his personality and his powers as a Primarch. Powers and gear. With the Great Crusade in full swing, Lorgar was often seen as the weakest and least combat capable of the Primarchs, despite possessing superhuman physical strength. However, upon openly declaring his loyalty to Chaos, his strength grew significantly, allowing him to confront Robote Guilliman as an equal during the Shadow Crusade campaign of the Horus Heresy. Even with this newfound strength, Lorgar continued to rely on his expanding psychic abilities as his primary asset in combat. By the time of the Battle of Calth, he could telekinetically vaporize multiple Space Marines with just a glance. During the pilgrimage of Lorgar, the Great Demon of Tzeentch, Chaos Fateweaver, made a rare truthful prediction, stating that Lorgar could defeat his foe Guilliman in battle at Calth and earn the respect of the other Primarchs as a formidable warrior. However, Kairos also warned that Lorgar's satisfaction in seeking revenge would lead to the failure of the traitorous rebellion against the Imperium. Additionally, Kairos foresaw that Lorgar would not survive a battle against his brother Corvus Corax. Lorgar occasionally utilised a deck of psych-active cards to enhance his precognitive skills, enabling him to discern when individuals were under the influence of demons. As the master of the 17th Legion, he also possessed the ability to engage in telepathic conversations with nearby Astartes, although this was a discomforting experience for the Space Marines involved. Following his complete embrace of the Chaos Gods, Lorgar's psychic powers experienced a significant surge. He gained the capability to beckon demons at his will, unleashing bursts of psychic elegy and dark fire, and bolstered his strength and psychic abilities in combat. His precognitive and telekinetic powers also saw substantial enhancement, as his allegiance to the Dark Gods granted him greater insight into sorcery. Illuminarum, an ornate powerful scepter maul, was created for Lorgar by the master weaponsmith Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands Legion. The weapon is perfectly balanced for Lorgar's strength and size, making it a formidable asset. Interestingly, it is believed to inspire the design of the chaplain Crozius. The Archaeotech pistol is an ancient firearm. The Archaeotech pistol is an ancient sidearm dating back to the Dark Age of technology, capable of firing a variety of projectiles, ranging from micro-atomic munitions to searing kill rays that draw power from the planet's magnetosphere. During the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, Archaeotech pistols were commonly wielded by high-ranking Imperial and Space Marine commanders. His deeds. During the Great Crusade, Lorgar led his legions in the relentless pursuit of eradicating all forms of blasphemy and heresy within the new Imperium of Man. They destroyed ancient texts and icons of other faiths and oversaw the construction of grand monuments and cathedrals dedicating to venerating the Emperor. The most esteemed chaplains of the Word-Bearers dedicated themselves to conveying the divinity and righteousness of the Emperor through monumental works and captivating speeches to the masses. Although the Word-Bearers faced challenges in bringing new worlds into Imperium compliance, their dominance over the subjugated was absolute. The transformation of the 17th Legion's essence, known as the Fires of Colchis, was a gradual process spanning solar decades. Even before reuniting with Lorgar, the Legion was massive, and their Primarch wisely orchestrated a gradual shift. Lorgar possessed a remarkable ability to touch the hearts of his followers, and his efforts to win them over were as intricate and far-reaching as the battles waged by the other renowned Primarchs. Slowly but surely, the belief in the Emperor's divinity spread amongst the brethren. The chaplains, acting as Lorgar's vanguard of faith, transformed their guidance to their brethren subtly, a practice later adopted by all legions after the Council of Nicaea. They established new organisational structures alongside the existing military hierarchy, forming fraternities that, while seemingly resembling those of other Space Marine legions, were actually instruments of propagating faith throughout the ranks of the 17th Legion. The repercussions of this monumental yet gradual conversion can be witnessed in Lorgar's subsequent corruption of half of the other legions and his descent of the Imperium into darkness. A far cry from his initial aspirations to raise it. It may appear perplexing that warriors like the Word-Bearers who had fervently fought to overthrow gods before Lorgar's return would embrace those same beliefs. However, this overlooks the fundamental nature of the Zealous. At their core, they crave a cause around which to build their world. The nature of the cause can be easily altered as long as it continues to inflame their spirits. The Astartes of the 17th Legion turned into religious fervour because, deep down, part of them had always yearned for it. Part of them sought to find more meaning in belief than mere rationality. During this time, Lorgar and the Word-Bearers were completely loyal to the Emperor and his Imperium. They dutifully collected tithes from the Emperor's name from their compliant worlds, and unquestioningly followed the orders of terror across liberated planets. For nearly a century, Lorgar and his legions faithfully carried out the Emperor's Great Crusade, without ever receiving any reprimand for their zealous devotion, despite it conflicting with the Emperor's policy of promoting the Imperial truth. However, the Emperor, despite his love for his son, became increasingly uneasy. While he had initially tolerated Lorgar's religious beliefs, as the Great Crusade progressed, the Emperor grew frustrated with the slow pace at which Lorgar was bringing worlds into compliance for the Imperium. Eventually, the Emperor commanded the Word-Bearers to halt their religious practices, emphasizing that their mission was to unify the galaxy under the secular Imperial truth, not propagate the Emperor's personal divinity. Opposed to organised religion, the Emperor was determined to establish reason and science as the guiding principles of the new interstellar human civilization. He was particularly troubled by the idea of being worshipped as a god, and the brutal actions of the Wordbearers' Legion against those who rejected the Emperor's divinity reminded him of the religious conflicts that had marred human history. With the unveiling of the truth, it was only a matter of time before the Emperor would take action against the Wordbearers. Although the specific sequence of events is not well documented, it is known that the Emperor waited for a period after the initial reports reached his court. He dispatched missions to ascertain more of the worlds conquered by the Wordbearers, possibly to gather information before taking action. Some accounts suggest that the Emperor even confronted Lorgar during this time, warning him of the consequences if he persisted in his actions. Imperial scholars cannot ascertain the accuracy of these accounts during the passage of time and deliberate suppression of certain records. However, it is a fact that the Emperor eventually took decisive action. It appeared evident that the Emperor didn't desire to shatter Lorgar or his sons, but rather to redirect them on the right path. The Ultramarines Legion boasted an outstanding track record of triumphs and compliant worlds. Even then, Ultramar was expanding, encompassing hundreds of obedient and prosperous star systems. Throughout the galaxy, the Ultramarines had expanded the Imperium's boundaries with zeal and a vision for what should come after the war. They were the Wordbearers' reflection and contrast, similar in many ways and yet different in countless others, a living embodiment of what the Wordbearers could aspire to. Perhaps that was the underlying message conveyed through the selection of the Ultramarines. There was a chance for redemption beyond the inevitable disgrace. Regardless of the intricacies of the reprimand, it was clear that the message would be delivered unambiguously. The Emperor commanded a task force comprising the entire Ultramarines Legion, accompanied by his elite personal bodyguards, the Legio Custodes, and the Emperor Regent Malkador the Sigillite, to destroy the capital city of the planet Kur, a world cherished by the Wordbearers. Kur considered its capital, Monarchia, the perfect city due to its intense religious fervour of its citizens, and the multitude of cathedrals and monuments venerating the Emperor as the god of humanity. As the Ultramarines razed the city, the entire Wordbearers Legion, 100,000 Space Marines strong, were commanded to assemble on the planet's surface, within view of the smouldering ruins of Monarchia. There, the Emperor personally humiliated and rebuked the Astartes, including Lorgar, forcing them to kneel in the ashes of a city that symbolized all they had stood for and accomplished, and elucidated that they had both failed him and humanity. He was not divine and would not tolerate such beliefs in his dominion. The Emperor departed, leaving the reprimanded Primarch and a humbled legion. Lorgar was dazed by his father's censure and refused to accept his worship, descending into profound despondency. Some would argue that future generations could perceive that all that ensued from this was born in that moment of despair. After the destruction of Monarchia, the history of the 17th Legion takes a divisive turn. One version is the narrative approved by the Imperium, a tale of the Legion's redemption and realization of its true purpose, which is essentially a falsehood. The other version is a clandestine history, veiled beneath a facade of loyalty. This concealed past remains unknowable, with Imperial scholars having only distorted fragments of knowledge about it. On the surface, Lorgar's reaction to the Emperor's rebuke was withdrawal. Initially, his legion appeared to play a minimal role in the Great Crusade. However, upon their return to action, it was evident that they had undergone a radical transformation. Previously known for lingering after conquest, they now advanced with unwavering determination, leaving scorched worlds and subjugated civilizations in their wake. While the Emperor appeared satisfied that his son had rectified his mistakes and was on the path to fulfilling his destiny, to others, the Wordbearers seemed driven by a fervent penance and relentless determination to erase the past. All were deceived. It is probable that Lorgar was deeply affected by the upheavals of his beliefs, but what course of action did it instigate? Initially, some believed that the 17th Legion had withdrawn in shame and returned to the Great Crusade to seek redemption. However, this benevolent interpretation of events no longer holds true. It appears more likely that Lorgar's descent commenced after Monarchia, with the corrupting influences of the Walk seizing him in his moment of doubt, offering him a power greater than what the Emperor had denied him, something to have faith in. The identity of these voices that counselled him, and the guiding hands that led him to damnation, remain shrouded in mystery. However, there are several figures as plausible candidates. Corphaeron, Lorgar's mentor and cultist and trusted advisor, along with the Legion's first chaplain Erebus, both deeply entrenched in cultist's old faith, are likely sources of corruption. This faith was likely tainted by the malevolent forces of the warp long before Lorgar fell from grace. The word pilgrimage is also one of the few remnants associated with this time, but its precise significance can only be speculated upon. What is undeniable is that the word-bearers who joined the Great Crusade after Monarchia no longer served the Emperor. After a series of visions depicting potential futures to come involving the other future traitor Primarchs and the Siege of Terror, Lorgar and the word-bearers were forever changed when they encountered the ruinous powers of chaos. Slowly succumbing to corruption, they became the first among the Legion Astartes to venerate the Chaos Gods, turning their backs on the Emperor. Through the remaining years of the Great Crusade, they endeavoured to awake humanity to the true spiritual nature of existence, ultimately resorting to manipulation and deceit to sway 9 of the Primarchs to the cause of chaos as dictated by their gods. Notably, they succeeded in influencing the War Master Horus. The Heresy. The castigation of Kerr was the turning point for the word-bearers, leading them to the services of chaos. Lorgar's contemplation of the Emperor's reprimand, along with the influence of his trusted lieutenant Corphaeron, gradually poisoned his mind against the Emperor. Corphaeron, now the master of the faith, played a pivotal role in converting the entire Legion to the worship of chaos. The word-bearers, instead of pledging allegiance to a single chaos god, revered chaos undivided, embracing the pantheon of the 4 ruinous powers. Lorgar and his word-bearers were instrumental in swaying War Master Horus to the worship of chaos. They introduced the Lunar Wolves to warrior lodges acquired from Davin, and later orchestrated events involving the word-bearers Chaplain Erebus to manipulate Horus into a vulnerable state for corruption by the Chaos Gods. Their newfound devotion remained clandestine until War Master Horus openly declared his faith in chaos, sparking the Horus Heresy. The word-bearers swiftly joined the rebellion, and many worlds that they had subjugated after their conversion also succumbed to the influence of chaos, fostered by the word-bearers during their conquest. The third world of the Istvan system, which was once capable of supporting human life due to its proximity to the sun, had been transformed into a desolate graveyard as a result of Horus Lupercor's wrath. The entire population of the planet had been reduced to contaminated ash, spread across lifeless continents, leaving behind only the ruins of their once thriving cities. The devastating orbital bombardment unleashed by the War Master's fleet, which included incendiary shells and virus-laden biological warfare pods, spared no one and nothing. Istvan 3 now orbits its sun in haunting silence, serving as a grim monument to the downfall of an empire. Surrounding Istvan 5 was an unprecedented gathering of ships, comprising the most impressive coalition of Astartes vessels in history. 7 entire legions, accompanied by their scouts, cruisers, destroyers and command ships, loomed in the skies over the planet with a precision that demonstrated meticulous planning. Shuttlecraft and gunships ferried between massive cruisers, while every warship prepared to deploy their warriors for the unparalleled planetfall. Horus, the treacherous son of the Emperor, had made his stand on the planet's surface. Unbeknownst to the Imperium of Man, 7 legions had been dispatched to eliminate their wayward scion, unaware that 4 of them had already forsaken their allegiance to the throne world. A momentous gathering took place aboard the Fidelitas Lex, Lorgar's flagship, where the commanders from the Night Lords, Alpha Legion, Iron Warriors, as well as 3 additional Primarchs, the Night Haunter, Alpharos and Megon, and Perturabo convened. Lorgar addressed the gathering of the traitors, emphasizing the significance of their cause and the impact this day would have on history. The word-bearers and their allies were convinced that the Imperium was fundamentally flawed, imperfect in its pursuit of a perfect culture, and weak in the face of Xenos threats that sought to subvert humanity. Above all, the Imperium had failed them by being built on lies, demanding them to sacrifice truth for expediency. They believed that this sinful empire was deserving of destruction. On Istvan 5, they would initiate the Purge, aiming to establish a new kingdom of mankind from the ashes, an imperium of justice, faith, and enlightenment, safeguarded by the avatars of the gods themselves. This empire would be resilient enough to endure a future of bloodshed and conflagration. The conflict on Isfahan V was a brutal and bitter battle of epic proportions. Former comrades in arms turned against each other, and the planet's surface echoed with the devastation caused by mighty Titan war engines and terrible dark mechanicum technology. The loss of life was staggering, with death lurking at every turn for both loyalist and traitor forces. The loyalists prepared for a final assault, whilst the traitors braced themselves for an inevitable showdown. Both sides understood the dire stakes and sacrifices required to prevent the domination of the false emperor and place Horus as the new master of mankind. Amidst the chaos and brutality of battle, the fury of a demigod was unleashed, a wrath beyond anger, beyond rage. Lord Corax, Primarch of the Raven Guard, charged into the ranks of the traitorous word-bearers, swiftly cutting them down with his black blades. As the dying enemies cried out for help, Argel Tal, leader of the demon-possessed Astartes known as the Galvorbak, confronted his doom at the hands of the relentless Corax. Meanwhile, Lorgar, mirroring his brother Primarch's actions, effortlessly slaughtered the enemy Astartes. As the word-bearers struggled to withstand Corax's onslaught, the Raven Guard fell back, leaving their fallen comrades in their wake. Against the advice of his advisors, Lorgar disregarded their counsel and engaged in a battle he had little chance of winning. He witnessed his brother, whom he barely knew, mercilessly slaughtering his sons, igniting a furious rage within him. Unleashing his psychic potential and embracing his unchained power, Lorgar reached out to his sons across the battlefield, manifesting his fury amidst the chaos. The clash between the Raven and the Heretic erupted into a symphony of violence, as Corax and Lorgar met in a fierce battle. The two Primarchs traded vicious blows, but the Raven Lord had the advantage not only of speed and finesse, but also being a penultimate warrior with decades of fighting experience. Lorgar did not, for he had always been more of a scholar than a warrior. His lack of experience cost him dearly as Corax impaled Lorgar through the stomach, the tips of his meter-long talons glinting to the other side of his spine as they thrust out his back. Such a blow meant little to a Primarch. Only when Corax heaved upwards did Lorgar stagger. The claws bit and cut, soaring through the ward-bearer's body. A luminarium slipped from the impaled Primarch's fist. Those same hands wrapped around Corax's throat even as the Raven Guard was carving his brother in half. Even as he tightened his grip on Corax's throat, the Raven Lord remained untroubled by his weaker brother's grip. Lorgar crashed his forehead against Corax's face, shattering his brother's nose, but still he could not free himself. The Raven Lord gave no ground, even as a second, third, and fourth headbutt decimated his delicate features. The claws jerked, snagging against Lorgar's enhanced bones. Corax tore them free, inflicting more damage than the first impaling had done. Blood hissed and popped as it evaporated on the force-filled blades. Lorgar fell to his knees, and clutched over his ruined stomach. As Corax stepped closer, he raised his one functional claw to execute his brother. Lorgar screamed his defiance at Lorgar, lost in the irony that of all the sons of his emperor, he was the one soul in 20 who'd never wished to be a soldier, and now here he would die at the heart of a battlefield. As the claw fell, it struck opposing metal. Corax locked eyes with a figure whose eyes were as dark as his own, set in a face as pallid as his. His talons strained against a mirrored weapon, the twin sets of blades grating as they clashed. One claw aimed to strike and kill, while the other stood firm in defensive ascent. The features of the Raven Guard Primarch were marked with a fierce determination, while the opposing face bore a grin, a smile stretched thin and void of mirth, like that of a corpse in rigor mortis. It was Conrad Kurz. As Corax attempted to wrench his claw free, Kurz's second gauntlet grasped his brother's wrist, ensuring that Corax could not flee and evade his destiny. Looking down at his fallen brother, Kurz commanded him to rise to his knees, his disgust for Corax's perceived cowardice evident. Corax, however, did not remain passive during this exchange. He ignited his flight pack, using up his fuel reserves to break free from Kurz's grasp. The Raven Lord's claw tore loose, and Corax ascended into the sky, propelled by jet thrust, away from Kurz's mocking laughter. Subsequently, Curse pushed Lorgar back towards his word-bearers. When Warmaster Horus betrayed the Imperium and turned to chaos during the Horus Heresy, his first move was to lure away as many loyalist legions from Terra as possible. He tasked Guilliman with leading an expeditionary force to Calth in the Viridian system in the realm of Ultramar under the pretense of preparing a campaign in the eastern fringes to combat an Orc war. Horus planned for the Ultramarines to join forces with the Word-Bearers for this campaign. Unbeknownst to Guilliman, the Word-Bearers had already turned traitor and gleefully accepted Horus's orders to ambush their long-time rivals. The sudden attack by the Word-Bearers devastated Guilliman's forces, and the Ultramarines found themselves outnumbered and pushed back during the intense Battle of Calth. Despite the initial losses, Guilliman regrouped his surviving forces and sent a distress call to Macragge for urgent assistance. The Loyalist Marines stationed on Calth, all of whom were Ultramarines, had initially engaged in a fighting retreat, but swiftly secured fortified positions. Many Ultramarines hailed from Calth and displayed greater determination than the Word-Bearers had anticipated. Meanwhile, Guilliman's vessels conducted hit-and-run tactics on their overconfident foes in space. Guilliman personally evaluated the ground troops' position and issued clear, concise directives to each defensive pocket, effectively uniting them in a cohesive force. Under the leadership of Captain Ventinus, one Ultramarine force successfully broke out and reclaimed Calth's defensive laser silos, providing crucial support to the beleaguered Ultramarine fleet from the planet's surface. Guilliman's depleted forces managed to impede the Word-Bearers long enough for the rest of the Ultramarines Legion to arrive and drive the Traitor Marines from the system, albeit at a great cost. However, the Word-Bearers turned Calth's own orbital defense platforms against the Viridian Star, causing catastrophic damage that made the planet uninhabitable. Simultaneously, the Word-Bearers exploited the conflict on Calth to summon a massive warp storm known as the Ruin Storm. This catastrophic event was intended to isolate Ultramar from the rest of the galaxy and prevent the Ultramarines from reinforcing Terra during Horus's assault on humanity's homeworld. The emergence of the Ruin Storm severed Calth from the main body of the Ultramarines Legion, leaving the Astartes of the 18th Legion engaged in a brutal subterranean war with the Word-Bearers, units abandoned when their legion withdrew from the Viridian system. Meanwhile, Rabute Guilliman had a significant portion of his legion remain off-world due to the Word-Bearers' treacherous assault on the Ultramarine fleet. Despite their losses, the undaunted Ultramarines received orders from Malkador the Sigillite, the Emperor's regent, as he was occupied with the secret Imperial Webway project. They diligently prepared to defend the Imperium against the traitor legions to the best of their ability. After this Shadow Crusade, a sequence of events that led to the Ultramarines being pushed back by the World Eaters and the Word-Bearers, and Guilliman being wounded badly, Lorgar started to doubt Horus's leadership abilities and his commitment to the Chaos Gods. He believed that Horus would lead the traitors to defeat on Terra. Lorgar secretly planned to kill Horus and take over as the Warmaster of Chaos. Taking advantage of Horus's incapacitation, after his fall at Beta Garmon, Lorgar, accompanied by the Dark Apostle Zardu Layak, approached Horus on his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. Although Horus was comatose, Lorgar agreed to gather the traitors at Ulanor to fight the final assault on Terra. Lorgar also suggested that Perturabo locate Angron while he sought out Fulgrim. With the help of an oracle disciple named Actea, Lorgar and his forces ventured into the Webway in search of Fulgrim. They successfully navigated through its dangerous paths, eventually entering the realm of chaos where they found Fulgrim and the demon Nakari engaged in debauchery. Fulgrim refused to leave, prompting a battle. Zardu Layak used the true name of the newly ascended Emperor's Children demon Primarch, binding Fulgrim to his will. With a powerful pawn in hand, Lorgar gathered the Emperor's children and arrived at Ulanor for Horus's muster. At this point, Horus had fully recovered, thanks to the sacrifice of his longtime friend, Equerry Malagurst. Lorgar disclosed his plan to overthrow the Warmaster, which involved a psychic attack on Horus followed by an order for Fulgrim to attack. The objective was for the Word-Bearers and Emperor's children to eliminate the Sons of Horus Legion, leaving Lorgar in complete control of the traitors' war effort by manipulating events on Ulanor. However, Lorgar's scheme quickly unravelled when Actea alerted Horus about the planned betrayal. Upon encountering Horus on Ulanor, Lorgar was immediately assaulted, preventing him from carrying out his psychic attack. Zardu Layak further betrayed Lorgar by freeing Fulgrim instead of ordering him to attack. Horus severely beat Lorgar and challenged him to fight, but Lorgar refused, expressing sorrow at the monster Horus had become. Horus then ordered Lorgar to leave and threatened to kill him if he returned. Lorgar left with 5,000 word-bearers who remained loyal to Horus and continued to campaign with him on Terra, while Zardu Layak's faction participated in the Siege of Terra. Following Horus's defeat at the Siege of Terra, the 17th Legion took refuge within the warp rifts of the Eye of Terror and the Maelstrom after his death. His final fate. The vile deeds committed by the Word-Bearers eventually led to Lorgar's transformation into a demon Primarch, achieving godlike status amongst his legion. His ascension to demonhood was a triumphant moment, as his unwavering devotion to chaos granted him immortality and immense power. For thousands of Terran years, Lorgar has secluded himself within the Templum Inficio on the demon world of Sicarus, allowing the Word-Bearers to be led by a dark council of powerful Dark Apostles. In contrast to other traitor legions, the Word-Bearers have remained a unified military force under the rule of the Dark Council. This ruling body is fiercely divided into two factions led by Erebus and Cor Phaeron, constantly vying for control of the Legion's future. From their strongholds on Sicarus and the factory world of Galnek, the Word-Bearers launch crusades against the Imperium in the name of the Dark Gods. Despite the staggering death toll, the Word-Bearers seek to enlighten humanity by imposing the worship of the Dark Gods in place of the Corpse Emperor. Lorgar briefly emerged from his isolation to confront Chorus Corax and later led his legion following the birth of the Great Rift. Reports suggest that he has been seen leading a massive Word-Bearers army, spreading the word of chaos in his wake. And so I have now covered the content for this video, but if there's anything that has been missed, please share them in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this content, please remember to like the like and subscribe waypoints down below. In the grim dark of the far future, there is only war.